Roar!
Ew.
Fluttershy Gets the Hiccups by NorsePony. Hic. Fluttershy set down her teacup on Rarity's kitchen table.
Hic,
she said demurely. Conversation ground to a halt and her 5 friends stared at her, waiting.
Hic,
she said again. Rarity cleared her throat.
Fluttershy, dear. Yeah, you have the hiccups. No, I'm
Rarity turned her teacup around on her hoofs. She met Twilight's eyes.
Fluttershy has the hiccups.
Fluttershy said. Twilight nodded.
Yes, she does. It's alright, I know what to do. Fluttershy, hic! Hold your breath and count to 100. That's a surefire way to get rid of the hiccups.
Fluttershy nodded and sucked in a deep breath. Her cheeks swelled up and she began tapping her hoof on the table, counting. Tap, tap, tap. Twilight smiled and it grew more satisfied with each tap. Tap, 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 tap. The breath exploded from Fluttershy and she gasped and panted. Twilight stared at her expectantly, and every pony else looked on curiously.
Hic!
Fluttershy said. Twilight rapped the hoof on the table in frustration.
Pony feathers!
Rainbow Dash snorted at Twilight.
That's not how you cure the hiccups. I'll show you the right way to do it.
She slid a hoof across the table and smiled sweetly at Fluttershy.
Give me your hoof.
Fluttershy glanced around the table at her other friends, then leaned back in her chair and slid her hoof towards Rainbow Dash. Dash patted Fluttershy's hoof.
The trick is to relax, see? Just think about, I don't know, sleeping bunnies or whatever, and then breathe in and breathe out.
Fluttershy followed her instructions and her shoulders drifted downwards as she relaxed.
Keep imagining the bunnies. They're all like little and fuzzy, I guess. And you're so relaxed and it's a dragon, it's gonna eat you!
Fluttershy screamed a high-pitched wail of terror. Dash let go of her hoof and folded her arms with a pout.
Ah, man, how does it not work? That always works!
Fluttershy's panic was subsiding.
Hic! Hic!
Applejack poked Rainbow Dash in the shoulder.
Shame on you, Rambo. That was mean and wrong hat at the boat. Granny Smith taught me the right way to cure hiccups. This is an old family remedy, handed down through the apple family for generations after generation. It never fails.
Fluttershy sniffled and wiped her eyes, then turned a pleading look on Applejack.
Hic!
She said.
Don't you worry, Sugar Cube. We're gonna get you fixed right up. You just wait and see. Get on up out of the chair.
She hopped out of her own chair and stood next to Fluttershy's place. Fluttershy climbed down from her chair. Applejack smiled encouragingly at her and nodded.
Alright, it's real simple. All you gotta do is turn around 3 times, then stamp your hoof on the ground, front and back, that's important, and then put salt on your tail.
Applejack stretched her neck to grab the salt shaker in her teeth and deposited it on the edge of the table in front of Fluttershy. She backed a step away and nodded at her.
Alright, hon, get to it.
Hic!
Fluttershy said, then frowned in concentration. She turned around once, twice, 3 times, then staggered dizzily. She shook her head, recovered, and stamped her front hoofs, then her rear hoofs. She sat on her haunches and flicked her tail forward to spread on the floor next to her. She took the shaker in her teeth and sprinkled salt on her tail, then set the shaker back on the table. Every pony stared at her expectantly. Fluttershy looked at her tail, then at Applejack.
Did it?
Applejack pushed her hat back, confusion on her face.
Well, shucks. That's the first time I've ever seen the family remedy not work. Maybe you gotta turn around the other way.
Hic!
Fluttershy said. Rarity's voice cut across Applejack's musing.
Pardon, darling, but I believe I have the solution for dear little Fluttershy's ailment.
Fluttershy whimpered.
Hic!
She said. Rarity nodded at Fluttershy.
Yes, quite. The remedy is simplicity itself. You have only to drink upside down, and your hiccups will be gone in a flash. I'll try anything.
Fluttershy squeezed her eyes shut and beat her wings, slowly lifting off the ground, then rotated in mid-air until her head was pointing at the floor. Rarity levitated Fluttershy's teacup to her waiting hooves. She held the cup to her muzzle and drank, accompanied by loud slurping and more than a little spillage. Rarity's eyes followed the splashes of tea to the floor, and she winced slightly as each one struck. She pasted on a broad smile and unclenched her teeth enough to speak.
There, that wasn't so bad now, was it, darling? And of course it was completely Hic!
Fluttershy said, then blushed.
I'm sorry, Rarity.
She righted herself and drifted to the floor. A wet smacking sound drew every pony's attention to Pinky sucking cookie crumbs off her hoof. She froze and swiveled her eyes to return their collective surprised stare. She slowly lowered her hoof to rest on the tablecloth. She blinked. They blinked back. She directed her attention to Fluttershy.
So, Hiccups, huh?
Fluttershy drew her head back with a confused wince.
Yes. Thank you for noticing. I'm sorry if I've been bothering you. Hiccups! Hiccups are easy.
Pinky made a tossing away motion.
Just give them to some pony else.
She pulled the cookie tray closer and leaned back in her chair with a satisfied look. Every pony glanced at each other, then returned to staring at Pinky.
Applejack ventured. I don't think it works like that.
Twilight pointed at Applejack and nodded.
Yes, exactly. Hiccups aren't a disease and they're not communicable. You can't just give them to some pony else.
Dash snorted.
Seriously, Pinky, even I know that much. Who would think something like,
She drew back from Fluttershy.
Why are you staring at me like that? Is there something in my teeth?
Fluttershy was indeed staring at her, brows drawn down in an angry squint.
Hic!
She said fiercely. Twilight cocked her head at Fluttershy.
Wait, you're not really trying to give her your hiccups, are you?
Rarity placed a gentle hoof on Fluttershy's shoulder.
Darling, you do know that it won't work, don't you?
Fluttershy shrugged off Rarity's hoof and stared harder, straining with the effort.
Atta girl, just like that.
Pinky said, spraying cookie crumbs over the table. Dash's eyes flicked to Twilight's face, then Rarity's, then back to Fluttershy. She took a step back.
It's not going to work, Fluttershy. You heard Twilight. Hiccups aren't communication. Communicable.
Twilight muttered. Dash continued backing up.
Yeah, that. Anyway, you can't give me your hiccups, so just stop looking at me like that, okay?
Fluttershy stood up, stare still locked on Dash, and took a step toward her.
You scared me. You told me there was a dragon. A dragon!
Applejack raised a hoof.
Sugar Cube.
Fluttershy stalked Dash across the room.
That's so mean. You know I'm scared of dragons. How could you? Why would you?
Applejack cleared her throat.
Fluttershy, hon.
Fluttershy turned her stare on Applejack.
What do you want?
Applejack flinched but pressed on.
You're not hiccuping anymore.
Fluttershy paused, her frown evaporating like smoke. Every pony waited with bated breath. A long moment passed. Fluttershy smiled.
You're right. Oh, I'm so happy.
Her hoof flew to her mouth.
Oh my, Rainbow Dash, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me.
She rushed to Dash and flung her arms around her neck.
Can you ever forgive me?
Dash had regained her composure and gave a fairly convincing smile as she patted Fluttershy's back.
Sure, no big deal. Water under the bridge, right?
Pinky cocked her head at Fluttershy.
But where did the hiccups wind up?
Twilight rolled her eyes.
Pinky, I already told you, that's not how hiccups work. Heck,
said Rainbow Dash. Pinky tossed a cookie into her mouth and smiled. Every pony else stared at Dash. Dash growled and dragged a hoof down her face.
Oh, for the love of it!
This fic was inspired by the Hiccup scene in Azumanga Daioh. Hello everyone, this is Visual Pony from Pony&Wolf Productions, and I thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this video. At this point, I want to thank all of our amazing patrons on Patreon for supporting this channel with their monthly donations and keeping the lights on around here. Now, more than ever, it is important that you support your favorite content creators, because due to YouTube's new content policy changes, we, along with other content creators, had to demonetize a lot of our most profitable videos. For us, those are the Fallout Equestria stories. As you can see on the graph on screen right now, our earnings per video used to be relatively okay, even though the earnings were never enough for a viable career. It was enough for a good, decent side income. Now we are struggling to pay our bills. If you want to support us for as little as $1 a month, you can do so by clicking on our Patreon link down in the description below. And you can get wonderful perks like, for example, early access to all of our stuff. Sometimes things like this are recorded months in advance. Voice acting lessons from me or Midnight, if you really want to. And you can join our Patreon Discord server. Even though it may look like there's not much going on in there, I am actually checking it on the daily. Thank you for listening to this message, and I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day.